The night feels heavier than usual, not because of noise, but because of the quiet that asks too many questions. You sit there, half in thought, half in memory, sensing something shifting beneath the calm. It is not sadness, not even pain, just the quiet realization that you have been carrying too much of what no longer belongs to you. Outside, the lights fade into a soft blur, and time itself seems to pause, listening. There, in that breath between holding on and letting go, something within you whispers, "No more." It is a fragile sound, yet it opens a door. And for the first time in a long while, life begins to move through you again, slow, tender, and real. The morning looks ordinary. A cup warms the hands, steam rises in a slow ribbon, and a familiar smile greets the mirror before the door opens. The commute moves like yesterday. The desk waits where it always waits, and small pleasantries float across the room like soft paper boats. From the outside, this is a gentle life. Inside, something quieter is keeping count. It is not pain, and it is not drama. It is the steady effort of holding together a version of a self that no longer feels like home. By noon, the body has done 100 small performances, each one harmless, each one costing a breath. The afternoon sunlight rests on the desk and turns the coffee cold. The messages are answered. The tasks are lined up and completed. The voice speaks in the right tone at the right time. Nothing is wrong, and yet something is not right. There is a form of exhaustion that does not come from effort, but from alignment that never quite happens. It feels like wearing a beautiful shirt that fits in the mirror and tightens by the hour. The fabric is soft. The color is kind. The pattern suits the room. But the buttons press against the ribs, and the breath stays shallow. The more it is adjusted, the less it belongs. Toward evening, the city begins to dim, and the windows of nearby buildings glow like quiet lanterns. He sits still and hears the faint ache beneath the day, the kind that is easy to dismiss and impossible to ignore. It arrives without sound. It has no story to defend itself. It is simply there, asking for room. He realizes he has not been tired of working. He has been tired of holding a shape. In that awareness, the room changes character. The lamp seems warmer. The chair seems truer. The air moves again. The mind searches for reasons and finds none that satisfy, because the truth is simpler than any reason. A self can outgrow a role the way a tree outgrows a pot. Growth is not loud. It is pressure against edges, felt in quiet places. He traces the day backward in small scenes, the practiced laugh that arrived too quickly, the yes that fell like a no wearing good manners, the praise that landed and did not stay. The moments are not mistakes. They are clues. Each one points to the same doorway, the one that opens only from the inside. The image returns of the shirt that looks right and breathes wrong. He imagines unbuttoning the collar and the ribs lifting like a curtain to let air pass through. He imagines setting the shirt aside and feeling the skin meet the evening without a layer in between. Nothing changes in the room, and yet the room feels larger. The silence is not empty. It is available. Somewhere beneath the neat rhythm of the day, a softer rhythm begins to lead. It is not concerned with performance. It prefers honesty to effort. It asks for one small act that costs very little and returns very much. Before sleep, he takes a pen and a plain page and writes a single line without decoration. He writes what he has been pretending he could still carry. He reads the line in a calm voice and does not argue with it. He does not fix it. He simply allows it to be true for as long as it needs to be true. This is how a life starts to fit again. This is how breath learns to deepen without being told. There is no peace in pretending. There are moments when the silence in a room feels heavier than the air itself. It sits on the chest, not as pain, but as a quiet truth waiting to be heard. The day still unfolds as it should, emails, gestures, polite laughter. But somewhere in the middle of it, something subtle begins to shift. The practiced tone falters. The smile lingers a little too long. The weight of keeping everything together starts to tremble, not from weakness, but from a life that no longer fits inside its shell. The mask never breaks all at once. It cracks along the lines of long-kept promises and quiet endurance. It begins in the eyes, where tiredness hides, and then travels downward through the small lies told to keep peace, through the muscles that tighten to hold composure. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It sounds like an exhale that takes longer than usual, or a tear that falls without permission. Truth rarely arrives with thunder. It comes like soft rain after too many dry seasons. The one who once carried everyone else now feels their hands trembling. The one who always smiled begins to sit in silence. The one who once said, "I'm fine," finds no energy left to pretend. They are not falling apart. They are expanding. The soul has grown too large for the old version of safety. To stay inside that skin would mean shrinking what was meant to be alive. Sometimes, strength does not look like endurance. It looks like surrendering to what is real. In that moment, the body becomes honest before the mind does. Tears come without shame, like a small rebellion against years of control. They are not a sign of fragility, but of the spirit reclaiming its right to feel. The voice softens. The shoulders drop. The armor begins to rust, not because it failed, but because it has served its purpose. It was built to protect, and now protection looks different. Even the quiet around them seems to change tone. The ticking of the clock no longer demands. It simply exists. The light through the window touches their face without asking them to smile. Everything, for the first time in years, feels unperformed. It is not comfort yet. It is clarity. It is the first breath taken without a script. To allow this is not to give up. It is to meet life at its true temperature. When exhaustion no longer frightens you, it turns into peace. When tears no longer embarrass you, they turn into cleansing. You begin to see that the fracture was never punishment. It was space being made for something new. Before sleep, they whisper a permission to the body that has carried so much. No explanations, no apologies, just the gentle acknowledgement. You can rest now. The cracks are not wounds. They are openings. Through them, light begins to enter, slow, steady, healing. What breaks you is what frees you. There comes a moment so quiet, it almost goes unnoticed. A question is asked. Are you all right? And the old reflex rises, the words forming before awareness can catch them. I'm fine. But this time, something halts mid-sentence. The tone feels thin, the breath shallow, as if the truth itself refuses to pass through the small gate of habit. A pause lingers between the words and the next inhale, and in that pause, the world seems to exhale with you. It is such a simple crack, barely visible to anyone else, yet inside it, an entire life rearranges. For the first time, the voice inside does not rush to keep up appearances. It only whispers softly, "No, you are not fine. not in a tragic way, not with drama, but with a deep, steady gentleness that feels strangely like relief. The silence that follows is not awkward. It is cleansing. It is the sound of armor unclasping. Honesty begins not with confessions shouted into the air, but with breath. To breathe deeply while telling the truth to yourself is to reclaim the simplest form of freedom. The lungs expand, and so does the soul. For years, the breath had been trimmed to fit into sentences meant to please, to calm, to control. Now, it finds its full length again. Truth is not a performance, it is respiration. He sits there, perhaps alone, perhaps in the soft noise of a room that has heard too many polite lies. Around him, nothing changes. The lamp still burns, the evening still folds into its own silence, but within, something unclenches. The need to be seen as strong, patient, grateful, all of it loosens its hold. He realizes that honesty is not rebellion, it is alignment. It is the soul exhaling after years of holding its breath. Sometimes honesty sounds like a sigh. Sometimes it sounds like silence. It is the moment you stop explaining your pain, stop polishing your edges, and simply admit to the mirror that life has been heavy. There is a tenderness in this recognition, not a defeat. The body, sensing permission, softens. The breath becomes slower, deeper, more your own. No effort, no defense, just truth, unadorned. He takes a pen and finds a page. The line appears almost on its own. I am tired of pretending that this does not hurt. The sentence looks back at him with compassion, not judgment. It does not ask to be solved or erased. It only asks to be seen. And in seeing it, he begins to see himself, unfiltered, unfinished, but real. That single sentence becomes the doorway through which air and light begin to move again. Freedom, he realizes, was never something to chase. It was something to breathe into. The moment you tell yourself the truth, even quietly, the weight begins to lift. You no longer need to keep the world convinced. You only need to let yourself exist without disguise. Honesty is not loud. It does not demand. It simply waits, patient and kind, until you are ready to return to it. And when you finally do, it feels like the first breath after a long dive, a breath that does not need permission to be taken, a breath that belongs entirely to you. Honesty is the doorway to peace. Every soul is a house built over time. Some rooms stay filled with light, memories of laughter, voices that still hum through the walls. Others are quiet, sealed behind doors we stopped opening long ago. They do not vanish. They wait. The air there is still, the dust thick, the silence older than words. Sometimes, even in the middle of a bright day, we feel a pull toward the door, a faint echo calling from behind it. But we walk past. We tell ourselves there is no need to look. The truth is, every person carries such a room. It holds what once felt unbearable, the mistake never forgiven, the anger swallowed too soon, the love that ended before it began. The mind locks it away, believing that distance equals safety. Yet, the door does not stay silent forever. In dreams, in sudden anxiety, in the quiet moments before sleep, that hidden room speaks. It sends whispers through the cracks, memories half remembered, feelings we thought were buried, the smell of something once burning bright. Avoidance does not erase. What we refuse to face becomes the shadow that shapes us. It leaks through our choices, our tone, our reactions to the smallest things. A word from someone can sting not because of what they said, but because it brushed against the door we never open. The heart tightens without knowing why. The darkness within does not wish to harm us. It only asks to be seen. But sight requires courage, and courage requires tenderness. One evening, he imagines walking through that inner house. The familiar rooms are tidy and well lit. Then he reaches the hallway that grows dim toward the end. The door there feels heavier than the rest. His hand hesitates on the handle. But this time, something within insists. The air behind it smells of dust and rain, and as the door creaks open, a thin beam of light cuts across the floor. Inside lies nothing monstrous, just the remnants of forgotten moments. A note never sent, a small photograph, the echo of a voice asking for understanding. The dust rises slowly, like memory learning to breathe again. He steps inside, and for a moment the heart races, expecting pain. Yet what comes is gentleness. The shadows soften around the edges. Each object in the room tells its story quietly. The regret, the shame, the anger, all of them have aged in silence, waiting not for punishment, but for recognition. He realizes the fear was not of what lived there, but of his own tenderness toward it. In seeing it clearly, its power begins to fade. There is a deep mercy in this act. When we name what we have hidden, it loses its grip. When we breathe inside the dark, the air begins to move again. He whispers one small truth aloud, something he once tried to forget. And the words do not hurt as much as expected. They sound almost kind. The room, now brighter, seems larger. The dust settles. The heart steadies. To visit what you fear is to return home. What was locked away was never meant to be erased, only integrated. The dark is not an enemy. It is a mirror that reflects what we are ready to love again. The dark only asks to be seen. Fear does not arrive as a monster. It comes quietly, shaped like caution, dressed in logic, whispering that it only wants to keep you safe. It hides behind small hesitations, polite excuses, careful plans. It waits at the edges of every choice, measuring risk and consequence. To most, it sounds like a warning, but in truth, fear is simply the language of a part of you that still longs to be protected. Every person learns fear early, though few learn to listen to it properly. The child who once felt invisible grows into someone who clings to attention, afraid of being forgotten. The one who feared abandonment becomes controlling, mistaking vigilance for love. The one who failed once and was shamed for it learns to outrun failure by working past exhaustion. Fear adapts. It wears new masks as we age. But beneath all disguises, its message remains the same. Please do not let me be hurt again. When ignored, fear hardens. It turns into anxiety, perfectionism, defensiveness, the mind's attempt to stay one step ahead of pain. But when heard, fear softens. Its sharpness dissolves, revealing the tenderness it was built to guard. It never meant to be the enemy. It only became loud because no one stayed to listen. Jung once suggested that what we repress becomes what controls us. Fear is not different. The moment you stop running from it, it stops chasing you. He notices it first in small reactions. The sudden tension when someone pauses before replying, the restless nights before decisions, the need to explain every choice. These are not random quirks. They are dialects of fear, each trying to communicate where it hurts. Some fears speak in shouts, others in silence. The body translates what the heart cannot articulate: a quickened pulse, a held breath, the urge to please. They are all phrases in the same language, waiting for translation. So he asks, gently, in the stillness of his own thoughts, "What are you trying to protect in me?" The answer comes not as words, but as a soft ache in the chest, as if something small had been waiting years to be acknowledged. It is the younger self, the one who was left behind in moments of rejection, misunderstanding, or loss. Fear stands guard at that door, mistaking solitude for safety. But now, with compassion, he realizes he can be both the guard and the comforter. When fear is met with listening, it begins to transform. The trembling becomes awareness. The tension becomes clarity. What once felt like resistance now feels like guidance. Fear does not vanish. It simply learns a gentler tone. The body no longer flinches at uncertainty. The heart no longer mistakes discomfort for danger. It starts to understand that the purpose of fear was never to stop you. It was to remind you where care is needed most. He closes his eyes and thanks the fear for trying so hard. The words feel strange at first, but something within relaxes. Fear bows, quieter now, its work complete. The room seems lighter, and the air moves with ease again. Fear softens when you listen. There comes a time when the mind grows quiet enough to hear the soft weight of regret. It arrives not to accuse, but to remind. The things left unsaid, the chances not taken, the moments you wish could have been different. They gather like fallen leaves in the corners of memory. For years, you may have tried to sweep them away, convincing yourself that forgetting is the same as forgiving. But forgetting only hides the ache. Forgiveness, when it finally comes, does something else. It makes space for breath again. To forgive yourself is not weakness. It is the most courageous act of all. It means standing before your own reflection without defense, without disguise, and saying, "Yes, I did the best I could with what I knew then." It means acknowledging that you hurt others or yourself, not out of cruelty, but confusion. It means accepting that growth always begins with imperfection. No one tells you that forgiveness feels like grief first, the mourning of who you thought you should have been. Only later does it turn to tenderness. He thinks of a young tree in a strong wind. Its trunk bends, its branches tremble, and yet it does not break. It learns the rhythm of the storm and moves with it. That bending is not weakness, it is wisdom. The tree survives because it yields. In the same way, the human spirit learns to bend toward compassion, to give itself permission to be flawed and still worthy of love. Every scar, every stumble becomes evidence not of failure, but of endurance. For so long, he had believed that being kind to himself would make him soft, that self-forgiveness would dull his edge. But harshness never made him stronger. It only kept him small. The voice that once demanded perfection begins to tire, and another voice, gentler, older, takes its place. It says that strength is not in resistance, but in the willingness to hold what once hurt and call it human. To say, "I was wrong," is not to collapse. It is to return to balance. He finds a blank page and writes a letter not to the world, but to himself. The words come slowly, trembling at first. "I am sorry for all the times I ignored your pain. I am sorry for asking you to be unbreakable when you only needed to rest. I am sorry for treating your tenderness as weakness." When he reads it back, the letter feels like a hand on the shoulder. Warm, steady, familiar. The guilt doesn't vanish, but it changes shape. It becomes humility, then peace. Outside, the wind moves through the trees. Some branches sway more than others. but all of them return upright when the air calms. Forgiveness works the same way. It bends what was rigid. It teaches the heart how to move again. To forgive yourself is to let your life grow around its own weather, no longer fighting every storm. He closes his eyes and breathes with a softness he once thought was weakness. The past no longer presses so hard against the present. There is room now for grace, for breath, for rest. Be kind to the person you have been. There is a peculiar stillness that follows letting go. At first, it feels like loss, like a sound cut short before the final note. The familiar weight that once filled the air is gone, and what remains seems hollow. It is like standing in a room after someone has left. The walls hold the echo of their presence. The air remembers their warmth, and yet the space feels strangely unfamiliar. The mind tries to call it emptiness, but emptiness has its own language. In the beginning, that language sounds quiet and cold. You reach for old habits out of instinct, like touching a wall in the dark, just to know where you are. The routines you once clung to feel fragile now, stripped of meaning. It can be disorienting, the absence of noise, of purpose, of what used to define you. But slowly, beneath the stillness, something else begins to move. It is not despair. It is air. The room breathes again. What has fallen away was not punishment. It was release. Life sheds what can no longer carry its growth. The friendships that dissolved, the goals that no longer inspire, the parts of you that no longer fit, they did not vanish out of cruelty, but completion. Just as trees drop their leaves, not out of loss, but to conserve what matters. You too are learning to survive by releasing what is no longer essential. The mind calls it ending. The soul calls it preparation. He walks through his apartment one quiet afternoon and notices the clutter he stopped seeing long ago. A shelf crowded with unopened letters, an old mug kept for sentiment, clothes that no longer feel like him. Each object is a story of attachment. Each carries a version of who he once was. One by one, he begins to move them aside, not out of anger, but reverence. The room becomes lighter. The act is small, but symbolic. Every cleared space outside makes more room inside. As dust rises in the slant of afternoon light, he realizes that emptiness is not absence. It is the invitation for something new to enter. The room does not feel lonely anymore. It feels ready. There is a quiet anticipation beneath the simplicity, a sense that something unhurried but inevitable is finding its way toward him. In this stillness, the heart learns patience. It stops demanding and starts listening. Letting go does not mean erasing. It means making peace with the shape of what remains. The memories that once clung to the corners of the room soften with distance. They no longer demand attention. They become background music, tender and low. The air feels different now, lighter, almost kind. He sits in the newly cleared space, aware of how much lighter his body feels simply from allowing things to leave. When things fall away, the self does not shrink. It expands. The silence left behind is not a void to fear, but a field to cultivate. Every space cleared is an act of faith in what will grow there next. He takes a slow breath, letting it fill the room. The emptiness is no longer empty. It is possibility, waiting to take form. Emptiness is not absence. It is preparation. In the modern world, silence has become unsettling. We fill it with movement, with screens, with sound, anything to avoid the echo that waits inside it. The hum of constant noise gives the illusion of safety. The moment it stops, something ancient stirs. The heart starts to hear itself again, and that is what frightens us most. Stillness reveals what distraction hides. It holds up a mirror not of the face, but of the soul. When the day ends and the lights dim, the absence of activity feels heavier than the hours that came before. The phone goes dark, the room stills, and suddenly the body feels too aware of itself. Thoughts rise like ripples on a pond. They bring back unfinished conversations, quiet disappointments, unhealed parts that have waited beneath the rhythm of daily survival. This is why people say they dislike silence. What they truly mean is that they fear the encounter it brings, the meeting with their own reflection. Yet silence is not an enemy. It is the first language of the spirit. Stillness is not the absence of life, but the ground upon which life regains its rhythm. When everything outside quiets, the inner world begins to rearrange. The mind, once pulled in 1,000 directions, starts to gather its fragments. The heart, once tense from endurance, begins to exhale. Stillness is not a void. It is a workshop of unseen repair. He remembers the surface of a lake he once saw at dawn. The air was cool and the water perfectly still. It reflected the sky so clearly that it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Then a breeze passed, and the image wavered, breaking into 1,000 soft distortions. Truth is like that reflection. It appears only when the wind of restlessness subsides. To see yourself clearly, you must allow the surface to still. So he begins a small ritual, 10 minutes a day. No music, no words, no screens. Just the quiet company of his own breath. At first, the silence feels dense, almost unbearable, as if time itself has stopped moving. The mind tries to fill it, to run, to justify its discomfort. But with each passing minute, the resistance softens. The thoughts lose their sharp edges. The body begins to trust the quiet. What was once emptiness turns into a kind of peace that asks for nothing. In those 10 minutes, he does not search for meaning. He simply allows it to appear. The silence, once frightening, becomes a presence, gentle, patient, aware. It begins to hold him rather than expose him. The noise of the world fades beyond the walls, and what remains is the steady pulse of being alive. Stillness, he realizes, is not where life stops. It is where meaning breathes. The next day, the noise returns, as it always does. But something inside him has changed. Beneath the rush, beneath the voices and the plans, there is now a calm space that remains untouched. It waits for him, faithfully, like a lake waiting for the wind to settle again. Stillness is where meaning breathes. There are nights when everything feels uncertain, when even the stars seem to flicker out of rhythm, and the path ahead dissolves into shadow. The human mind, trained to measure and control, begins to tighten at the edges. It wants reasons, answers, timelines. It wants the comfort of order. But life, like the sea, does not obey such demands. Beneath its calm surface, chaos moves quietly, reshaping the shore in ways we cannot predict. Nietzsche once wrote, "You must have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star." The line is not a warning. It is permission to let disorder live beside grace. Chaos is not destruction. It is the pulse before creation, the necessary storm that clears the air for something new to take form. Every artist knows this. Every soul that has rebuilt itself from loss knows it too. The world does not grow in straight lines. It swells, contracts, and shifts. To resist this movement is to fight against your own becoming. The deeper truth is that life unfolds even when you do not understand it. The unseen works in silence. He sits by the window at night, watching the rain move across the glass. The drops race downward, merging, separating, dissolving into trails. There's no pattern to it, yet it feels strangely intentional. The rhythm of the rain has no conductor, yet somehow it creates music. In that quiet, he senses what the intellect often forgets, that not everything meaningful can be mapped. Some things must be trusted long before they are understood. The mind, left alone with uncertainty, tries to predict its way out of fear. It sketches imaginary outcomes, bargains with what has not yet happened, builds walls of reason around what cannot be reasoned. But when you pause, when you stop reaching for the map, a strange peace begins to emerge, not the peace of certainty, but the peace of surrender. To trust what you cannot see is not to give up control. It is to recognize that control was never the same as safety. He takes a page and writes down one thing he cannot control: a future decision, a relationship's outcome, the fragile balance of the world itself. At first, the sentence feels incomplete, without a solution beside it. But as he reads it aloud, slowly, the words begin to soften. Acceptance does not solve anything. It simply opens space around the unknown. The air feels lighter, the chest less tight. In that moment, uncertainty is no longer the enemy. It becomes the teacher of patience. The universe has always worked this way. Stars are born from the collapse of chaos, from clouds of gas that lose their balance only to ignite into light. Creation and disorder are not opposites. They are stages of the same dance. The soul, too, must sometimes unravel to find its shape. You do not need to see the whole pattern to trust that one exists. Outside, the rain begins to fade. The clouds part, revealing a faint shimmer, one small star pulsing through the mist. It is not a promise of clarity, but of rhythm. The unseen continues to move, quietly, purposefully, beneath the noise of every thought. The unseen works in silence. Most exhaustion does not come from doing too much. It comes from scattering your energy into places it was never meant to go. The body can rest, but the mind keeps pouring itself into arguments that will never end, into people who will never understand, into expectations that keep shifting just beyond reach. You tell yourself it is just effort, but it is more than that. It is leakage, the slow, invisible loss of life through cracks you stopped noticing long ago. Imagine a water jar sitting beneath a steady stream. It should fill, yet it never does. There is a small fracture at the bottom, almost invisible but constant. No matter how much is poured in, the jar remains only half full. The human spirit is not so different. Every moment of over-explaining, every attempt to please, every battle to stay in control, each is a tiny crack through which vitality seeps away. By nightfall, you wonder why you feel empty even when the day seemed manageable. The answer is not that you lack time, but that you gave too much of your quiet away. He notices it one afternoon while scrolling through messages, half listening to the noise around him. His shoulders tense at a familiar tone. Someone disagreeing, misunderstanding, or needing him to fix what is not his to fix. He feels the reflex rise, to defend, to clarify, to smooth things over. But this time, he stops, mid-thought. It is like seeing the crack for the first time. The urge to engage is not strength, it is habit, and habit left unexamined, becomes a drain. Control, too, is another leak. The mind believes that if it can predict enough, plan enough, explain enough, it can keep the world from disappointing it. But every ounce of control costs energy. It builds a wall against what could have been fluid. You cannot keep your hands clenched and expect the heart to stay open. Letting go is not passivity. It is sealing the crack that constant tension creates. Pleasing others, though it feels noble, often comes from fear. Fear of rejection, of disapproval, of being unseen. It is the most elegant kind of leak, disguised as kindness. You give your time, your words, your calm, until one day you realize you have been carrying everyone else's peace but your own. To stop is not selfishness, it is repair. It is remembering that attention is a form of power, and whatever receives it grows. That evening, he takes a pen and writes 3 things that drain him: a person, a pattern, a pretense. Then he draws a single line through one of them, the one he will stop giving energy to today. The act feels small, but the relief is immediate, like tightening a seal that had been leaking for years. The silence that follows is not empty, it is restorative. For the first time in a long while, he feels his own presence returning, as if the water within has finally stopped escaping. Where attention goes, energy flows. To direct it wisely is to live deliberately. To protect it is to honor your existence. And when you finally stop leaking your light into everything that demands it, you realize how much brightness you still hold. When you finally stop pouring yourself into what drains you, something subtle begins to change. The world looks the same, but the air feels lighter, the mornings softer. There is a quiet hum beneath your skin that had been missing for years. It is not excitement or relief. It is the slow return of life. The kind that doesn't announce itself with fireworks, but with peace. What once felt heavy begins to lift, not because the world has changed, but because you have stopped leaking your light into it. Recovery is not a single act. It is a slow reassembly of the self. When you walk away from what hurts, the first thing that comes back is not happiness. It is space, empty, still, unfamiliar. You may mistake it for loneliness, but it is really the silence of repair. The heart, like soil after a storm, needs time to dry before it can grow again. To rest is not to quit. It is to let the soul catch up with the body. Energy, once scattered, starts to gather quietly at the center. He notices it on a small, ordinary morning. The sun filters through the curtains, touching the floor with soft gold. The same room, the same cup of tea, but something inside feels less urgent. There is no longer the pull to fix, to prove, to run. He steps outside, and the air feels alive again, not because it has changed, but because he can finally feel it. The body no longer braces against life. It receives it. This is what happens when you stop giving your power to things that never deserved it. Life begins to return, uninvited, but deeply welcome. Self-love, he realizes, is not in the grand gestures of confidence or achievement. It lives in the quiet rituals that say, I matter. Sleeping on time, eating with presence, saying no without guilt. These are not luxuries. They are acts of repair. To rest is to declare yourself worthy of energy that once went elsewhere. When you start honoring that rhythm, vitality flows back not as reward, but as remembrance. The body remembers balance, the soul remembers ease, the heart remembers trust. For 3 nights, He chooses simplicity over stimulation. No late distractions, no endless scroll, no attempts to stay busy. Just the slow surrender to sleep at a decent hour. At first, it feels almost rebellious to rest without earning it, but soon it becomes sacred. The dreams that follow are gentler, the mornings more grounded. Energy begins to hum in quiet places again, behind the breath, beneath the thoughts, within the pulse of being alive. Every restoration begins with one soft decision. The moment you stop trying to prove your worth, you begin to feel it. The moment you stop chasing, you begin to receive. Reclaiming your energy is not about becoming new. It is about remembering what was always yours. You were never broken, only scattered. And now, piece by piece, you are coming home to yourself. You are reclaiming what was always yours. True strength does not roar. It does not demand to be seen or proven. It moves beneath the surface, steady and patient, like the roots of a tree holding firm through a storm. The world often mistakes noise for power, voices raised, opinions sharp, speed celebrated as success. But what endures is rarely loud. It is the calm presence that remains when everything else begins to shake. Quiet strength is not about dominance. It is about groundedness, the ability to stand still without losing balance. When chaos rises, most people rush to control. They argue, explain, defend, or panic. But the one who breathes first holds the true advantage. Calm is not indifference. It is awareness in motion, the pause that allows wisdom to arrive before reaction. When you breathe slowly in the middle of disorder, something ancient awakens, the part of you that knows storms always pass. You cannot stop the wind, but you can grow deeper roots. He remembers watching an old tree on a windy morning, its branches swaying wildly while the trunk stood unmoved. What kept it upright was not force, but depth. The roots, hidden and silent, were the reason it survived. People too have roots, values, patience, inner trust, but we often forget to tend them. Instead, we strengthen the surface and neglect the foundation. True resilience is not built in moments of calm, but in how you remain centered when life bends around you. In that understanding, he begins a simple practice. Whenever frustration or fear arises, before speaking, before defending, he breathes 3 long, deliberate breaths. The first releases tension from the body. The second brings awareness back to the present. The third opens space for clarity. Only then does he act. It seems too simple to matter, yet this pause changes everything. The breath becomes an anchor, keeping him from drifting into the old tides of reaction. Each time he chooses calm, his roots grow a little deeper. Quiet strength is not about denying pain or pretending everything is fine. It is about holding your center when life demands more than you thought you could give. It is patience without passivity, courage without noise. There is a particular grace in not needing to prove your steadiness, just being it. The calm person in a room full of chaos is not weak. They are the silent axis around which everything eventually settles. As the days pass, he notices that people begin to mirror his stillness. Arguments soften, tasks feel lighter. Even the air around him seems less charged. Calm is contagious because it reminds others of what they too possess. The world will always spin, but your peace does not have to. Strength was never meant to be a performance. It was meant to be presence. The storm may roar, but a tree does not shout back. It simply stands, alive, breathing, and sure of its place. And so can you, not through force, but through calm. Not through noise, but through knowing. Calm is your new power. Every human being carries a quiet ache, the longing to be seen. Not for what they do, but for who they are beneath all performance. We search for it in love, in friendship, in success, hoping someone will look at us and say, I see you, and you are enough, man I. But this hunger, left unchecked, becomes a trap. The more we chase recognition from others, the further we drift from the only gaze that truly matters, our own. Love for many begins as a mirror. We look into another person not to see them, but to catch a reflection of ourselves. The warmth of their attention feels like proof of existence. When they withdraw it, the world dims, as if a part of our identity has been stolen. Yet the truth is simpler and far more liberating. No one can complete a self that is still unseen by its owner. The need to be chosen is born from forgetting that we were whole before anyone arrived. He remembers sitting across from someone he once loved, waiting for them to notice the new haircut, the small effort, the way he had softened his voice to keep the peace. But their eyes were elsewhere, their silence filled with distance. That night, he realized the pain was not rejection itself, but dependence. He had built his worth on borrowed light. When that light faded, he mistook the darkness for loss, not realizing it was the perfect time to learn his own glow. The human ego, as Jung suggested, is a delicate mask crafted to gain approval, to belong. Yet every time we shape ourselves to fit another's expectation, we carve away a fragment of truth. Approval is addictive precisely because it mimics love while feeding fear. When you need someone to see you in order to feel real, you give them quiet power over your sense of self. But when you learn to see yourself, to witness your own heart with honesty and care, the hunger begins to dissolve. He begins a new practice. One evening, in the stillness of his room, he writes 3 things he loves about himself, qualities that have nothing to do with achievement or how anyone perceives him. At first, the pen hesitates. The mind searches for what sounds worthy, but then something softer speaks. He writes, I am patient. I am gentle when I could be harsh. I keep trying to grow. The words look simple, almost ordinary, yet they hum with quiet truth. For the first time, he feels seen, not by the world, but by the witness within. To love yourself is not arrogance. It is remembering what love was before you outsourced it. The more you honor your essence, the less you need external confirmation. Paradoxically, the moment you stop chasing validation, connection deepens. You no longer meet others as someone starving for reflection, but as someone already whole, ready to share light instead of beg for it. The soul does not crave applause. It craves recognition from within. And once you give it that, every interaction becomes lighter, freer, more genuine. You stop auditioning for love and start participating in it. You are not here to be chosen. You are here to see yourself. There is a kind of love that feels like holding your breath, tight, anxious, afraid that if you let go, everything will disappear. And there's another kind, quieter and far more rare, that feels like exhaling. It does not demand or cling. It does not measure affection by proximity or proof. It allows both souls to exist fully, even apart. That is the love that frees rather than confines, that nourishes rather than consumes. True love is not born from need. It begins when 2 whole beings meet, not to complete each other, but to recognize one another. When love grows from emptiness, it becomes possession, an attempt to fill a void that was never someone else's to mend. But when it grows from fullness, it becomes space, an invitation to breathe within another's orbit while remaining yourself. Jung once wrote that relationships are not meant to make us happy, but conscious. Love, in its highest form, is not about merging. It is about awakening. He remembers a time when love felt heavy. Every silence between messages seemed like rejection, every disagreement like distance. He mistook closeness for security and thought that being loved meant being needed. But one day, sitting alone after the end of something that once felt infinite, he realized that what hurt most was not the loss of the person, but the loss of the mirror. He had been trying to see himself through someone else's eyes. What remained now was uncomfortable, but honest. Solitude. And in that solitude, something began to shift. The quiet no longer felt like absence. It became a sanctuary. He started to enjoy mornings without waiting for a message, to walk without narrating the moment to another mind. Slowly, he learned that aloneness is not loneliness. It is freedom without witnesses. Love, when freed from fear, does not shrink your world. It expands it. The heart becomes less a cage and more a sky, wide enough for both presence and distance. He begins a small practice. Each day, he sets aside time to be with himself, not as a task, but as communion. No phone, no music, no agenda, just being. At first, it feels awkward, as if he is waiting for someone who will never arrive. But with time, he realizes that he was the one he had been waiting for all along. In those moments, love ceases to be something he seeks. It becomes something that flows from him, effortlessly, like breath. Freedom does not end love. It refines it. It removes the desperation that once masqueraded as devotion and leaves behind what is pure, presence. Two people who love from freedom do not trap each other. They orbit in mutual respect, knowing that connection is strongest when it is chosen, not clung to. Love grows where freedom lives. And when you finally breathe without fear of loss, you discover that real love was never meant to take your air. It was meant to teach you how to breathe it. Letting go is one of the quietest acts of courage. It doesn't sound like anger or finality. It sounds like an exhale after a long-held breath. Many imagined release as rejection, as if to loosen the hand is to forget what was once held. But true letting go is not about erasing. It is about completion. It is recognizing that every chapter has done its work and every presence has played its part. What was once necessary becomes memory, and memory, when honored, becomes peace. We cling not because we love too much, but because we fear the emptiness that follows. The mind mistakes release for loss, yet loss is only the shadow of transformation. Like a candle burning low, its light fades, not because it failed, but because its purpose has been fulfilled. The flame has already shared its brightness. The darkness that follows is not punishment, it is rest. When something leaves your life, whether a person, a dream, or a version of yourself, it does not vanish. It dissolves into the quiet soil of becoming, planting what will one day bloom again. He remembers the last time he said goodbye, not in words, but in silence. The conversation had already ended long before either of them admitted it. For weeks, he tried to hold on, hoping effort could turn the tide. But one evening, Standing by the window, he realized the truth. Love cannot be forced to stay where it has already finished its work. That moment did not break him. It freed him. The pain did not disappear, but it softened into understanding. What remains after letting go is not absence, it is gratitude. He begins a practice that feels almost ceremonial. Sitting at his desk, he writes a letter to what he has been holding, maybe a name, a year, a younger self. He thanks it for what it taught, for the warmth it gave, for the growth it demanded. Then, slowly, he writes the final line. You have served your purpose. You can rest now. As he reads it aloud, his voice trembles, but not from grief, from reverence. The words do not close a door. They open space. For the first time, the past no longer pulls. It bows. To let go with grace is to understand that endings are not the opposite of love. They are part of its natural rhythm. Just as the tide must retreat to make room for its return, we must sometimes empty ourselves to be filled again. The heart, when unclenched, does not lose, it breathes. Release, then, is not weakness. It is trust in the unseen order of things, faith that what is meant to stay will find its way back, and what must go will do so with blessing. Letting go is another form of love. It is the love that no longer needs to hold in order to honor. It is the light that no longer burns, yet continues to warm through memory. It is the hand that opens not to push away, but to finally allow both souls to rest. To live is to stand between contradictions. Within every human being exists a quiet battlefield. Love and fear, strength and fragility, hope and doubt, all moving together like two tides meeting beneath the surface. We spend years trying to silence one in favor of the other, believing that peace means choosing a side. But peace is not the absence of tension. It is the grace of holding both without breaking. To be alive is to be a paradox, fire that warms and burns, water that soothes and floods. The dance of opposites is not a flaw in our nature. It is our wholeness in disguise. He once believed that courage meant the absence of fear, that love meant never feeling doubt. But life has a way of revealing its truths through quiet contradictions. He remembers standing on the edge of a new beginning, heart racing, palms trembling. He wanted to move forward, but fear whispered that he might fail. And yet, beneath that fear was a second pulse, a strange, fragile bravery that whispered back, "Go anyway." Both voices spoke, neither wrong. In that moment, he realized that courage was not defeating fear, it was walking with it. The soul, as Jung described, seeks integration. It does not ask us to destroy our shadows, but to meet them. Imagine two rivers flowing from different mountains, one clear, one dark, meeting in the valley below. For a while, they swirl together, the waters cloudy and uncertain. But given time, they settle into a new current, still distinct, yet whole. This is what happens inside a person when acceptance replaces denial. The opposites do not cancel, they harmonize. We often reject parts of ourselves that seem contradictory, wanting independence yet craving connection, being gentle yet fierce, rational yet deeply emotional. But contradiction is not confusion. It is evidence of depth. The heart can hold more than logic permits. To demand purity from emotion is to drain life of its truth. You are not meant to be one note. You are the chord. The symphony of self is richer when you allow every tone to sound, even those that clash before they resolve. That evening, he begins a small practice. In his journal, he writes down two emotions he once thought incompatible: joy and sadness, love and anger, peace and restlessness. Reading them side by side, he does not try to choose one. He lets them both exist on the page, breathing together. The act feels strange at first, but soon it becomes freeing. Acceptance softens the inner conflict, and for a moment he feels whole, not because he is one thing, but because he is many things living in balance. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means allowing every part of yourself to have a voice. It means understanding that vulnerability does not weaken strength, it completes it. The mind may seek clarity, but the soul seeks harmony. And when you stop dividing yourself into pieces that must be hidden or justified, you begin to dance again, with life, with paradox, with truth. To be whole is to be both fire and water. Pain has a strange way of introducing us to ourselves. It strips away illusion, leaving only what is essential. Comfort soothes, but pain refines. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." He understood that suffering, when faced with awareness, can become a kind of alchemy. It turns raw experience into depth, confusion into understanding, and despair into wisdom. Pain, left unexamined, hardens the heart. But when embraced with curiosity, it opens a door that peace never could. There is a moment in every life when comfort ends abruptly. The job dissolves, the relationship fades, the dream falters. At first, it feels like the world has closed in. The air thickens with questions. Why me? What now? But beneath those questions lies a quieter one, the one that changes everything. What is this trying to teach me? Pain doesn't arrive as punishment. It arrives as a mirror. It reflects the places where we are still asleep, where meaning has yet to be born. He remembers the year everything seemed to fall apart. The plans, carefully made, unraveled one by one. For months, he resisted, clinging to the familiar shape of what had been. But eventually, exhaustion replaced resistance, and in that stillness, something unexpected began to grow. He started writing, not out of hope, but out of need. Each sentence was a way to breathe through the ache, and slowly, he realized that pain had given him something comfort never did: honesty. It stripped away the unnecessary, revealing what truly mattered. The ache became a compass, pointing inward. Pain reshapes perception. It teaches patience, humility, and empathy, the quiet understanding that every person you meet carries an invisible wound. It turns judgment into gentleness. Like soil after rain, the soul becomes softer, more fertile. When Nietzsche spoke of bearing the how, he was not glorifying suffering, but recognizing its potential. When you discover your why, pain loses its power to destroy. It becomes fuel, not fire. He begins a practice to honor this transformation. On a blank page, he writes a simple question: what has pain taught me that comfort never could? The answers come slowly at first, then flow like truth, long waiting to be spoken. It taught me to listen. It taught me to stop chasing. It taught me that survival is not the same as living. Each realization feels like light filtering through cracks that once seemed permanent. The wound does not close because it is ignored. It closes because it has been understood. To turn pain into meaning is to reclaim authorship of your story. It does not mean pretending it did not hurt. It means deciding that the hurt will not end the narrative. Every scar becomes a line of poetry, every fall a lesson in grace. You may not choose your pain, but you can choose what it becomes. Pain is not the enemy. It is the teacher of depth. Freedom begins the moment you stop fighting every emotion and start watching it. Most people mistake awareness for passivity, as if to observe means to do nothing. But true awareness is an act of quiet power. It is the choice to stand still while the storm passes, to see the waves of emotion without being pulled under. The difference between suffering and understanding often lies not in what happens, but in how closely you identify with it. You are not every thought you think, nor every feeling that flows through you. You are the one who sees them. He used to react to every flicker of emotion, anger, sadness, fear, as if each were a fire that needed to be extinguished. Life became a constant emergency. But one evening, in the silence after an argument, he felt something different. Instead of defending, he sat down and listened. The anger did not vanish, but it lost its claws. Beneath it was something else, hurt. Then beneath that, exhaustion, and beneath that, silence. It was as if each layer dissolved the moment it was seen. That night, he realized awareness doesn't solve emotion, it softens it. To witness yourself is to stand on the riverbank of your own mind. The current of feeling moves fast. Joy, grief, irritation, longing, but you remain on solid ground. You watch the water rush past, knowing that every wave, no matter how fierce, will eventually fade into stillness downstream. This is not detachment. It is compassion in practice. You learn to seek your pain without collapsing into it, your joy without gripping it too tightly. The observer within you is calm, patient, and infinitely kind. In a moment of sorrow, he tries something new. Instead of escaping the feeling, he places his hand over his chest and whispers, "This is what being human feels like." The words are not meant to fix anything. They are meant to anchor him in presence. The sensation of the hand, the warmth of the breath, the simple acknowledgement, these become reminders that emotion is not an enemy. It is movement, not identity. As he breathes through it, the sadness shifts from something heavy to something real, almost sacred. It no longer demands reaction. It only asks to be witnessed. Awareness transforms chaos into clarity. When you stop reacting automatically, you begin to see the hidden patterns, the fears that repeat, the stories that keep you small, the habits that steal your peace. From this distance, you can choose differently. You are no longer a prisoner of your moods, but a student of them. Jung once suggested that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. To witness yourself is to begin that illumination, to turn the unseen into something you can understand, accept, and release. Over time, this practice changes the texture of life. The highs and lows still come, but they no longer throw you off course. You become the steady presence behind every experience, the sky behind every storm. There is peace in that perspective, not because life grows easier, but because you no longer confuse the weather with the world. Awareness is freedom in slow motion. There comes a time when the noise finally begins to fade, not because the world has quieted, but because you have. After the long storm of striving, explaining, defending, and surviving, a silence arrives that feels unfamiliar at first. You expect peace to be bright and triumphant, a reward for endurance. Instead, it arrives gently, like a tide returning to the shore it never truly left. Peace is not a prize. It is the ground beneath all the motion. It was always there, waiting beneath the noise of becoming. He wakes to a still morning, The sky outside is pale, the kind of color that feels like a pause between seasons. For a moment, he listens, not to words, but to the absence of them. There is no urgency, no demand, no echo of yesterday's struggle. Only breath. In that breath, he realizes something both simple and profound. Peace does not come from control. It comes from surrender, the quiet recognition that nothing more needs to be added or removed for this moment to be complete. The storm had not destroyed him. It had revealed what could not be taken. The mind, trained to seek and measure, resists this simplicity. It wants proof that calm has been earned, that it will last. But peace does not obey the rules of effort. It is not an achievement, but a remembering. Beneath every wave of emotion, beneath every burst of chaos, there is a still depth that never moves. The surface thrashes, but the ocean floor remains steady. That is where peace lives, not above life, but within it. He sits on the edge of his bed and practices something small yet sacred. He closes his eyes, inhales deeply, and whispers, "I am still here." The words are not triumph, but truth. They do not celebrate survival. They affirm presence. The body, marked by all that has passed, relaxes. The breath, once hurried, finds its rhythm again. In that moment, he understands. Peace is not something to be gained, but something to be uncovered. It had been buried beneath layers of noise, but it had never left him. Peace is not a static state. It is a living awareness. It moves with you, breathes with you, waits patiently in the pauses between thoughts. Even when chaos returns, as it inevitably will, it remains beneath the surface, ready to be remembered. The storm's purpose was never to destroy, but to wash away what was false. What remains now is clarity, not perfection. The calm is not absence of struggle. It is presence without resistance. As the light changes, he looks out the window. The world, wet and quiet, glows softly. Trees stand still after they dance with the wind. The air carries the scent of renewal. Nothing extraordinary has happened, and yet everything feels new. In the distance, a single bird calls, not announcing the end of the storm, but the continuation of life. Peace is not found. It is remembered. Awakening does not mean escaping pain. It means seeing it clearly without turning away. The world does not soften simply because you have grown wiser. Only your gaze does. Maturity is not measured by how little you feel, but by how gently you allow things to be what they are. The awakened person no longer fights with reality. They meet it quietly, without the need to win. Clarity is not cold. It is compassion in motion, the willingness to look at truth and still choose love. He used to think peace meant avoiding discomfort, building a life so controlled that nothing could disturb it. But avoidance is not peace. It is fear disguised as calm. The real turning point came one ordinary afternoon when a familiar irritation arose, someone's sharp tone, an unexpected disappointment. His old instinct was to tighten, to argue, to retreat behind logic or silence. Instead, this time, he paused. He whispered to himself, "Let it be seen." The phrase landed softly but carried weight. The irritation didn't vanish, yet it began to lose its edge. It became something to observe, not to defend against. Clarity is not the same as detachment. To live with open eyes is to let life enter fully, the joy, the confusion, the grief, and to hold each without judgment. The mind's first reaction is always to label good, bad, success, failure. But awareness sees past labels. It recognizes that everything, even the uncomfortable, belongs to the same vast unfolding. The rain that ruins your plans also nourishes unseen fields. The silence that hurts today becomes the ground of tomorrow's peace. When you stop resisting what is, life stops resisting you. He begins to practice this gentle seeing in small ways. When frustration rises, he no longer silences it. He watches the tightening of his chest, the quickening of thought. Then, instead of drowning in it, he breathes and says again, "Let it be seen." The emotion moves through him like a wave. It has a beginning, a crest, and an end. Beneath it all, there is always stillness. To witness pain without fear is to reclaim power from it. The eye that observes cannot be consumed by what it sees. Living with open eyes means surrendering the illusion of control. It is choosing honesty over comfort, presence over avoidance. The world becomes less of a battlefield and more of a classroom. Each encounter a lesson in patience, each mistake a reminder of humility. This is not passive acceptance. It is conscious engagement with truth. The awakened mind does not chase happiness. It seeks understanding, and in that understanding, it finds a deeper kind of peace, the peace of alignment with what already is. As the evening fades, he sits by the window, watching the last light stretch across the horizon. The day, with all its small imperfections, feels complete. There is nothing left to fix, nothing left to prove. Everything is simply allowed to exist. His feelings, his thoughts, the world itself. In that moment, he sees clearly, and the seeing itself is love. Clarity is compassion in action. Dawn arrives quietly, as if the world itself is taking a slow breath after a long night of rain. The air is clear, washed clean, and the light spills gently across the floor. It is not dramatic, not triumphant, just steady, soft, inevitable. This is what renewal truly looks like. Not fireworks, not grand awakenings, but the quiet return of what has always been there beneath the noise. After every unraveling, something remains untouched. The still, unbroken essence that has been waiting for you to notice. He sits by the window, the smell of rain still lingering. The storm has passed, leaving the sky pale and patient. For a moment, he simply watches the way light finds its way through everything. The leaves, the cracks in the pavement, the thin curtain that sways with each breeze. It touches without choosing, forgives without words. In that light, he senses a truth too simple to sound profound. What breaks does not destroy you. It only removes what you are not. Beneath every ending is something that refuses to end. Rebirth does not arrive with noise. It begins when you stop searching for who you were and start listening to who you have become. Every loss, every silence, every surrender has been shaping you into someone truer. Growth is rarely visible while it happens. It hides beneath patience, beneath acceptance. Just as the earth repairs itself beneath fallen leaves, the soul mends quietly beneath awareness. You do not have to rebuild yourself from nothing. You were never truly gone. He takes a few steps closer to the light on the floor. It glows like a soft pulse, alive yet unmoving. He sits down beside it and closes his eyes. For 3 minutes, he does nothing but breathe. No goals, no mantras, no striving to be better. Just breath moving in and out like waves returning to the shore. In the beginning, thoughts still try to surface. Unfinished conversations, old regrets, but they fade quickly, replaced by stillness. In that stillness, he finds not emptiness, but presence. This, he realizes, is what healing sounds like when it finally stops trying. The rebirth is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before you forgot. The self beneath fear, beneath the masks of being enough, beneath the noise of survival, it has been there all along, waiting in the quiet. The silence that once frightened you is now the space where you can hear your own truth again. The light does not demand anything from you. It simply invites you to exist within it, fully, without resistance. As the morning grows brighter, he opens his eyes. The world looks unchanged, yet nothing feels the same. The rain has dried, but the reflection of it remains, soft, shimmering, alive. He stands, stretches, and smiles at the thought that life too has its own rhythm of return. Every ending has been preparation for this moment, the gentle rediscovery of peace. The silence you feared has become your teacher. The morning feels kind. The light slips quietly through the window, touching the corners of the room with warmth. You sit there, still, breathing evenly. No rush, no noise, just the quiet rhythm of being alive. Around you, the world is waking, but inside, there is only calm. It feels different now, not because life has become easier, but because you have stopped running from yourself. The storm has passed, and what remains is not the wreckage, but the foundation, the home you had been searching for all along. You have walked through every shade of yourself, from pretending to be fine to finally allowing truth to breathe, from the dark corners of fear to the soft clarity of peace. You have learned to listen instead of explain, to release instead of hold, to trust instead of chase. The walls you built to protect yourself have turned transparent, and through them, light moves freely. The person you once tried so hard to become has quietly dissolved into the one you already are. Take a deep breath now. Feel it fill the space within your chest. The same space that once held confusion now holds calm. You are no longer waiting to be understood, because now you understand yourself. The quiet that once felt empty now feels full, of meaning, of softness, of life. This is what it means to come home, not to a place, not to another person, but to the still center of your own being. Outside, the light continues to spread, unhurried, gentle. The day begins, and so do you, without effort, without armor, simply as you are. Whatever comes next will come, but you will meet it differently now, not with fear, but with presence, not with pretending, but with peace. Because you have remembered something that was never truly lost. Everything you seek outside has always lived within.